The courtroom hummed with quiet tension as Amelia Carter stood alone at the defense table. Her simple hoodie and sneakers a sharp contrast to the polished suits around her. Judge Theodore Grayson leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth curling into a smug grin. He scanned her with a look that suggested this entire moment was already beneath him. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice thick with mockery, "are you aware of where you are? This isn't some after-school club. This is a court of law." Laughter rippled behind her. Attorneys chuckled. A few whispered smugly to each other, enjoying the show. Amelia's fingers tightened around the papers in her hand, but her gaze never wavered. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, but nothing could prepare her for how small the room could make her feel. "I understand exactly where I am, Your Honor," she replied, her voice calm, steady, far steadier than her heartbeat. Judge Grayson raised a brow, mildly amused. "And what is it you think you're doing here, young lady?" Before she could respond, he waved a hand dismissively. "No, don't answer that. I've already wasted enough time on juvenile theatrics. The court should have never allowed this nonsense in the first place." The courtroom stirred with murmurs. Some smirked. Others looked intrigued. But no one expected what came next. "If you would let me speak, Your Honor," Amelia said, her tone unshaken, "you might find it worth your time." Gasps whispered through the room like wind through trees. Did she just talk back to a judge? Grayson leaned forward, the smirk sliding off his face, replaced with a frown. "You have 5 minutes, he snapped. "Use them wisely." Amelia took a breath that felt like it pulled the weight of the world into her lungs. She adjusted her papers, straightened her shoulders, and spoke. Not like a teenager. Not like someone afraid of being humiliated. She spoke like someone who had lived this moment 1,000 times behind closed doors, where no one saw the tears, the notes, the late nights surrounded by law books too heavy for her desk. Her voice echoed through the room, confident and exact. She cited case law. She referenced constitutional clauses. She broke down courtroom procedure with such precision that pens dropped and eyebrows lifted. The same attorneys who had laughed minutes earlier now scribbled notes furiously. Judge Grayson stared at her. For a moment, he wasn't mocking. He was stunned. "Who are you?" he asked, not with sarcasm this time, but genuine bewilderment. Amelia let a quiet smile touch her lips. "My name is Amelia Carter," she said, "and I'm here to defend my client." Chaos broke loose. Spectators leaned forward, some whispering furiously, others outright gasping. Cameras flashed. The judge's gavel slammed for order, but even he looked shaken. This was no child's game. This was real. And Amelia Carter had just turned the courtroom into her proving ground. 2 weeks earlier, that same determination had flickered to life in a room no larger than a closet. Amelia sat cross-legged on her bed, the thin mattress barely visible beneath the avalanche of legal books and scribbled notes. The lamp on her nightstand cast a warm but tired glow over pages dog-eared from constant use. Her brother's handwriting still marked the margins. His thoughts, his study points, his dreams. James Carter had been 2 months away from passing the bar when everything fell apart. Across from her, Lily sat with a bag of chips in one hand and concern all over her face. "I still don't get it," she said, crunching loudly. "You're 16. You're not even out of high school. What are you trying to prove?" Amelia didn't look up. Her pen kept moving across the yellow legal pad, underlining clauses from a case she had already memorized. "It's not about proving anything," she said, though her voice betrayed the lie. "It's about doing what's right." Lily scoffed gently, not cruelly, just lost. "Amelia, come on. Your brother's in prison. There's nothing you can do now. You really think studying a bunch of books is gonna fix that?" Amelia paused, finally looking at her. Her eyes weren't sad. They were steady. solid, like stone that had been weathered into shape. I think someone has to try. James always believed I could do something important, and I refused to let what happened to him be the end of his story. The silence between them stretched. Lily didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because she saw something unbreakable in Amelia that scared her a little. What Amelia didn't say out loud was how the world had treated her since James was convicted. Teachers had started lowering their voices when they spoke to her. Neighbors who used to wave now offered pity. Her parents, shattered by the verdict, tiptoed around her like she might crack if someone breathed too hard. But Amelia wasn't breakable. She was angry. She was smart. And she was tired of being dismissed by a system that crushed people like her brother while protecting people like Victor Grant. She had spent nights combing through his case files, reading every witness statement, every line of testimony, the evidence that could have exonerated him. A security video from a bar had somehow vanished before the trial. The man he was accused of assaulting. Wealthy, connected, unquestioned. The truth wasn't in the headlines. It was in the shadows, and Amelia was willing to walk through every one of them to drag it into the light. Now, back in the courtroom, that girl who had once studied silently in the dark stood beneath fluorescent lights, challenging everything the system thought it knew about who deserved to speak. This wasn't just about defending her client. It was about rewriting the narrative they'd tried to write for her. Judge Grayson leaned back in his chair, arms folded, as if trying to decide whether to be impressed or irritated. The courtroom was still, all eyes fixed on Amelia. For a few seconds, the usual hum of whispering attorneys and shuffling papers had fallen away. Even the court reporter had paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. "Miss Carter," the judge said finally, "are you telling me you're representing the defendant today?" "A minor. With no law degree?" "Yes, Your Honor," Amelia replied, steady as steel. "And where exactly did you study law?" he asked, sarcasm creeping back into his tone. She didn't blink. "I didn't go to law school. But I've spent the last year studying court procedure, legal doctrine, precedent. Every case relevant to my client's situation." The gallery behind her shifted uncomfortably. Some were intrigued. Others looked ready to object on principle. But no one was laughing anymore. "You believe that's enough to qualify you?" the judge asked, now more skeptical than mocking. Amelia held his gaze. "No, I don't just believe it. I'm prepared to prove it." Before Grayson could reply, the courtroom doors creaked open. Heads turned. A tall man stepped in, suit pressed to perfection, a leather briefcase swinging lightly from his hand. He walked with practiced ease, confidence in every step. "Your Honor," the man said, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "If I may have a moment of the court's time." Judge Grayson narrowed his eyes. "And who are you?" The man approached the bench and set his briefcase down with gentle precision. "Daniel Hayes, representative of the Bar Association." A ripple moved through the courtroom like a gust of wind. Amelia's breath caught in her chest. She hadn't expected this. Not now, not this soon. Judge Grayson sat up straighter, a flicker of annoyance dancing beneath his calm exterior. "And what does the Bar Association want with this case?" Hayes opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and flipped it open with quiet deliberation. "We received an anonymous tip," he said, "about an unlicensed individual attempting to practice law in this courtroom." He looked directly at Amelia for the first time. Not with judgment, not with ridicule, but curiosity. As though trying to figure out how a girl had managed to outmaneuver the courtroom, even for a second. "It's a serious matter," Hayes continued. "Representation without a license can carry consequences, for the defendant and for the court." Amelia's fingers curled around the edge of the table. This was the moment she'd feared. The moment the system would try to shut her down, not because she was wrong, but because she didn't have the right paper. Judge Grayson leaned forward, as if savoring the upper hand. "Well, Miss Carter, I suppose this brings us to a very inconvenient truth. You're here without formal credentials, and I have a professional from the bar breathing down my neck. What exactly do you propose we do?" Amelia stood a little taller. "I propose you let me continue. If I'm unprepared, if I'm wasting the court's time, I'll accept the consequences. But if I'm right, if I'm better prepared than the attorneys who ignored this case, then my client deserves to be heard." Hayes tilted his head. There was something flickering in his eyes now. Maybe respect, maybe disbelief. The judge sighed, fingers tapping against the desk. "This is highly irregular," he muttered. "But fine. Miss Carter, you may continue." Temporarily. The room exhaled as one. Amelia nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." She turned to her client, Mr. Peterson, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and wrinkled hands. He had been quiet through it all, watching her with something like hope and something like fear. "Let's begin," she whispered, and just like that, the girl they had tried to silence became the one voice the courtroom couldn't ignore. Amelia didn't waste a second. With her opening statement ready, she walked to the center of the courtroom, holding a stack of neatly marked documents. Every step she took silenced another doubter. Every word she spoke began to unravel the prosecution's carefully stacked narrative. "The prosecution claims Mr. Peterson embezzled funds from his employer," she began, her voice cutting clean through the silence. "But the financial records tell a different story." She handed out copies of a timeline she had created, showing a discrepancy between when the alleged transactions occurred and when Mr. Peterson had access to the system. Several dates didn't align. One transaction happened while he was out of the country, backed by travel receipts and company emails confirming his absence. She moved with the calm precision of someone twice her age. She didn't stutter. She didn't hesitate. She cited past cases, referenced chain of custody protocol violations, and even called attention to a known flaw in the software used to track company funds, something even the defense hadn't noticed. At first, Judge Grayson just watched her with a mix of suspicion and intrigue. But as her points stacked up, his posture shifted. His chin rested on his hand. His brow furrowed. He was listening. The courtroom had changed. The girl in the hoodie had seized it. But just as Amelia began to present her next set of documents, Mr. Hayes stood again. "Your Honor, if I may remind the court, Miss Carter is still not a licensed attorney. No matter how compelling her argument is, this sets a dangerous precedent." Grayson didn't answer immediately. The murmurs in the room returned. Amelia could feel the floor shifting beneath her. Before the judge could speak, the doors opened once again. A boy, no older than 10, ran into the room, clutching something tightly in his small hands. "Amelia," he shouted. The courtroom froze. She turned, stunned. "Ethan." He ran straight to her, cheeks red from the cold and eyes wide with panic. "You forgot this," he said, breathless, thrusting a crumpled envelope into her hand. Every gaze in the room followed the envelope like it was a live grenade. Amelia's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what it was. She hadn't meant to bring it. Not here, not now. Judge Grayson's voice rang out, sharper than before. "Miss Carter, what's in that envelope?" It's personal, Your Honor. It has nothing to do with this case." The judge narrowed his eyes. "You're already on thin ice. If that contains anything relevant and you're hiding it, you'll be in contempt." Ethan tugged on her sleeve. "Show them," he whispered. "James said it would help." Amelia's hands trembled. The paper was soft and worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. Her brother's letter. The last one he'd given her before being taken to prison. A letter filled with encouragement, belief, and a challenge. Fight for what's right, even when you're the only one fighting. She didn't want to open it in front of all these people. But the judge was waiting. Everyone was. Before she could respond, Mr. Hayes intervened again. Your Honor, he said, calm but firm, whether or not this letter is relevant, it doesn't impact Miss Carter's qualifications. We're drifting from the matter at hand. The judge raised his hand. I'll decide what's relevant. Amelia looked to her client, then to Ethan, then to the judge. And with a breath that tasted like fear and defiance, she slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, folded neatly. The ink slightly smudged from years of handling. Amelia didn't read it aloud. She didn't need to. Every word was already etched in her memory. Judge Grayson watched her, expectant. Well, he prompted. Amelia folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She looked him straight in the eyes. It's not evidence. It's not legal documentation. It's a letter from my brother. It has no bearing on this case. The judge didn't press her, but his gaze lingered, trying to read between the lines. Whatever he saw in her face made him pause. Then, with a sigh, he nodded. Very well. But understand, Miss Carter, this is your last warning. One misstep, and I won't hesitate to remove you from this courtroom. Understood, Your Honor. She glanced at Ethan, gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze, and nodded toward the back of the room. Go sit with Lily. I'll be okay. As the boy scurried off, Amelia returned to the defense table. But before she could speak again, the courtroom doors opened for a third time. And this time, it wasn't a child. It was a woman, tall, sharply dressed in a dark blazer, hair pulled back so tightly it looked like she never allowed herself a moment of rest. Her heels clicked with authority as she strode toward the bench. Your Honor, she announced, her voice slicing clean through the murmur that followed her in. Margaret Steele, representing the district attorney's office. I'm here to address a matter of immediate concern. Judge Grayson's brow furrowed. Miss Steele, this is highly irregular. What concern could possibly justify another interruption? Miss Steele's gaze drifted to Amelia. Her expression gave nothing away. It concerns the unauthorized presence of this individual, she said coolly, gesturing at Amelia, and the legal consequences of allowing her to proceed. The shift in the room was immediate. The tension returned tenfold. The judge's hand hovered near his gavel, but he didn't bring it down. Explain yourself, he said. Steele didn't flinch. If this court permits Miss Carter to continue, it constitutes a violation of legal ethics. As a representative of the DA's office, it's my responsibility to ensure that the courtroom operates within the boundaries of the law. Amelia's throat tightened. She could feel the trap closing. Miss Steele wasn't just here to question her qualifications. She was here to discredit her, completely. But she couldn't retreat. Not now. Not after everything. Your Honor, Amelia said, rising again. I respectfully request the chance to prove myself. My client deserves a defense. If you take me out of this courtroom, you leave him with no voice. Judge Grayson looked between her and Miss Steele, clearly torn. Hayes stepped forward again, his voice steady. I may not agree with this situation, Your Honor, but Miss Carter has demonstrated a clear understanding of the law. We cannot let the letter of the system override the spirit of justice. The judge stared at Amelia for a long, quiet moment. Then he spoke. Fine. You may continue. But make no mistake. This is the last thread holding this together. Slip once, and I will cut it. Amelia nodded. I understand. She turned to her client. We're not done yet. But across the room, Margaret Steele smiled. Just faintly. Because she had come with more than objections. She had brought a witness. The door creaked open again, and a man stepped into the courtroom. Tall, poised, dressed in a tailored navy suit that seemed to dare anyone to question his authority. Amelia's stomach dropped before his name was even spoken. Victor Grant. The man who had destroyed her brother's life. The man whose influence had twisted the truth, buried evidence, and walked away with his reputation intact. His presence wasn't a coincidence. It was a threat dressed in silk. Miss Steele gestured toward him with a small wave of triumph. Your Honor, this is Mr. Victor Grant. He is a key witness in this matter and will testify to Miss Carter's history and motivations, both of which are crucial to assessing her fitness to appear in this court. Amelia's heart pounded. She locked eyes with Grant. He gave her a slow, deliberate smile. It wasn't joy. It was possession. The look of a man who still believed he held the pen that wrote her fate. Judge Grayson looked unimpressed. Mr. Grant's relevance here is tenuous at best, he said. Explain why I should hear from him. With respect, Steele replied, Mr. Grant's testimony will reveal Miss Carter's personal involvement in past legal proceedings. Proceedings that call into question her objectivity, her professionalism, and her ability to act as legal counsel, no matter how unconventional this case may be. The judge sighed, irritated, but motioned toward the stand. Fine. Mr. Grant, you may proceed. Amelia felt her throat tighten as Grant made his way forward. He moved like he owned the courtroom. As he was sworn in, he barely glanced at the Bible. His right hand might as well have been dipped in lies. Steele began her questioning smoothly. Mr. Grant, can you tell the court how you first became acquainted with Miss Carter? He smirked. I first saw her during her brother's trial. He was convicted of assaulting me after a fight outside a bar. The court found him guilty. But Miss Carter, she wouldn't let it go. The murmurs were immediate. Amelia could feel eyes turning toward her, hungry for scandal. And how did she behave during that time? Steele asked, her tone laced with feigned concern. She was disruptive, Grant said, tilting his head as if he were explaining something unpleasant but obvious. She glared at me through every hearing. She sent letters to the court, tried to reopen the case, made phone calls. Obsessive. Unstable. Amelia stood. Your Honor, this is character assassination. His testimony has no bearing on Mr. Peterson's case. The judge raised a hand, silencing her. You'll have your chance, Miss Carter. She sat, fists clenched so tightly her knuckles ached. Steele pressed forward. In your opinion, is Miss Carter emotionally fit to represent a client in court? Absolutely not, Grant replied, with a touch of theatrical offense. She's reckless. Passionate. Yes. But that kind of emotional volatility is dangerous in a legal setting. Dangerous. The word landed in Amelia's chest like a branding iron. She had been called many things. Bold, bright, stubborn. But never dangerous. Until now. And still, she didn't flinch. Because if they thought this courtroom was the end of her story, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Amelia rose slowly, her expression carved from steel. The judge gave a reluctant nod. You may cross-examine the witness. She approached the stand with deliberate calm, every step echoing in the hushed courtroom. Victor Grant didn't look fazed. Yet, he sat with the ease of someone who had testified before, someone used to having his version of the truth accepted without challenge. Mr. Grant, Amelia began, you've accused me of being disruptive during my brother's trial. Can you provide a specific example? He leaned back, smug. You were loud. You interrupted court proceedings. You refused to accept the verdict. That's not specific, she said, her tone steady. That's opinion. I asked for an example. Did I speak out in court? Did I violate court orders? Grant's smile faltered for just a second. You stared at me. You glared. Is staring a criminal offense, Mr. Grant? Murmurs flickered through the courtroom again. His jaw tensed. You sent letters to the court. You tried to reopen the case. I advocated for my brother, she said, not flinching. A man who, as we now know, was denied a key piece of evidence, security footage that never made it into the courtroom. Grant looked away for a fraction of a second. Let's talk about that footage, she continued. Do you recall why it was deemed inadmissible? He shifted in the chair, adjusting his cuffs. I don't recall. That was a decision made by the court. Amelia stepped closer. Isn't it true that the footage contradicted your claim that my brother assaulted you? Grant's face darkened. Objection. This is a personal attack. Overruled, Grayson said, eyes sharp. You opened this door, Mr. Grant. Answer the question. Grant hesitated. The footage was incomplete. Amelia didn't need to press further. The discomfort rippling through him was enough. She turned slightly toward the judge and jury box. So, to summarize, your accusations against me are based on emotion. You haven't provided a single concrete example of misconduct. And your own credibility is based on a trial where evidence mysteriously disappeared. Judge Grayson opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a loud crash erupted from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, out of breath, his face pale and frantic. In his trembling hand, he held up a small USB drive. I have evidence, he said, his voice cracking but clear. I used to work for Victor Grant. This proves everything she's saying is true. The courtroom exploded into gasps. Amelia didn't move. Couldn't breathe. The man's name meant nothing to her. But the truth in his voice hit like lightning. The truth was rising from the ashes. And this time, it wasn't coming quietly. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Judge Grayson slammed his gavel, but the noise barely cut through the uproar. Victor Grant's face twisted into a snarl as he glared at the man in the doorway. Amelia stood frozen, her mind racing. This was the moment she had waited for, the missing piece that could unravel everything. Order! Grayson bellowed, finally silencing the room. He turned to the man. Identify yourself. The man stepped forward, his hands shaking but his voice steady. Thomas Riley, former IT specialist for Grant Industries. I was ordered to delete the security footage from the bar that night. But I kept a copy. Grant shot up from his seat. This is a lie. Your Honor, this man was fired for misconduct. He's trying to sabotage me. Amelia's pulse pounded in her ears. She looked at the USB drive, then at the judge. Your Honor, I request that this evidence be reviewed immediately. If it proves what Mr. Riley claims, it changes everything, not just for my brother, but for this case. Judge Grayson's eyes flicked between Amelia, Grant, and Riley. For the first time, his usual smugness was gone, replaced by something resembling doubt. He exhaled sharply. Bailiff, bring me that USB. As the bailiff took the drive and plugged it into the courtroom system, the room held its breath. The screen flickered to life, revealing grainy but unmistakable footage, the bar, the altercation, and, most damning of all, Victor Grant throwing the first punch. James had acted in self-defense. The gasps were louder this time. Grant's face drained of color. Amelia's hands trembled, but her voice didn't waver. Your Honor, this proves my brother was wrongly convicted. And it calls into question the credibility of Mr. Grant's testimony today. The judge leaned back, rubbing his temples. Miss Carter, you've made your point. He turned to Grant. Mr. Grant, you will remain in custody pending further investigation into this matter. Grant's lawyers surged forward, but Grayson cut them off with a sharp wave. Enough. This court is adjourned for the day. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the implications of this new evidence. As the gavel fell, the courtroom burst into motion, reporters scrambling for the door, attorneys whispering furiously, spectators buzzing with disbelief. Amelia turned to Mr. Peterson, whose tired eyes now shimmered with hope. We're not done yet, she whispered. But we're closer. Across the room, Daniel Hayes watched her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He nodded once, as if acknowledging a truth neither of them needed to say aloud. Amelia Carter had just changed the game, and she was only getting started.